I always thought peace was just something you bought with hard work and quiet mornings. On the best days, it was the way Ruth would hum to herself as she kneaded dough, or how Micah snuck bites when her back was turned. Out here at the edge of Dust Whistle, the world was small enough that I could pretend I was only a farmer, not the man folks whispered about behind closed doors. But the past never stays buried. Not really. That morning, the wheat was so dry it snapped like brittle bones between my fingers. The sky had the washed-out look it gets before a storm, but the air was still, heavy with the promise of nothing at all. I was halfway through checking the south fence when I heard Micah whooping from the porch. "Pa! If you don't get in here soon, I'll eat your share of breakfast myself. Ruth says you're not so thin you can't miss a meal." I couldn't help but smile at the boy's voice, loud as a rooster at dawn. He was 12, all elbows and wild hair, already trying on the gruffness of a man, but with none of the world's weight yet. Ruth was waiting inside, her eyes sharp but kind, hands dusted in flour. She paused at the door, frown creasing deeper than usual. "Heard talk in town, Zeke," she said, voice low. "About trouble. Livestock gone missing, barns burned. Don't. Take the rifle to Dust Whistle. Folks are nervous enough," I grunted, waving off her worry. "Ain't planning on trouble, Ruth. Just need seed and salt." Still, her unease clung to me like a second shirt. The last time she'd warned me about trouble, it was the year of the fever, when half the valley lost someone they loved. That memory flickered, but I forced it down. I was done with violence. The man I used to be. He was gone, traded for a better life with them. I saddled the old bay and rode into Dust Whistle with nothing but a battered hat and the coins Ruth pressed into my palm. The town looked the same as ever. Dusty Main Street, porch swings creaking, the whiff of cattle and sweat drifting between the buildings. Still, the mood felt off. Even the dogs moved quieter, tails low, as if the whole place was holding its breath. In the supply store, Harper greeted me with a stiff nod, more polite than warm. I felt eyes on my back, the way you do when strangers walk in and no one knows. Their business. 3 of them stood near the far shelves, coats too clean, eyes too quick, the kind of men who carried trouble in their pockets. They didn't say a word, but the space around them felt tight. Dangerous. I kept to myself, buying what I needed, but I could feel their stares pricking the back of my neck. As I left, Harper leaned in, voice barely a whisper. "Watch yourself, Zeke. They're not from around here. Folks say they came up from the south, asking about farms out this way." I nodded, heart thudding just a little harder, but I told myself it was nothing. Just passing drifters. Every season brought a few, hunting work or worse. Still, Ruth's warning gnawed at me. I rode home the long way thinking about the last time the valley had seen real violence. How quiet it had been afterward. How blood never quite washes out of dirt. When I got back, the house was quiet, sun low behind the barn. I set the supplies down and looked out over the fields, feeling a restlessness I hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, I wondered if maybe I should have listened, if leaving the rifle behind was more than just stubbornness. But I shook it off. No sense in borrowing trouble. My family was waiting. The farm was whole. For now. When I crested the last rise that night, the sky had turned the color of an old bruise, yellowed at the edges, deep purple in the center. The air tasted wrong, sharp and metallic. For a moment, I thought maybe Ruth was burning trash out back, but then I saw the black column curling up from behind the barn. My horse balked at the stink of smoke and something underneath. Something raw. I dropped the reins and ran. The closer I got, the more the world seemed to narrow, sound falling away until all I heard was my own breath, ragged and useless. The house was nothing but a scorched skeleton, roof caved in, windows gone. Flames still gnawed at the porch rail. I stumbled through what used to be the front door, shouting their names, but the silence answered back, horrible and complete. I found Ruth first, slumped by the table, her dress charred, hair plastered to her face. One hand was curled around the handle of a cast-iron skillet. There was blood on the floor, black and sticky. She fought, I realized. Fought for her life, for Micah's. I nearly tripped over him, my boy, crumpled near the hearth, one arm outstretched, his small body already cooling. There weren't any words left in me, no screaming, no tears, just a slow, careful moving of bodies as if I was assembling someone else's sorrow. I dug the graves myself, knuckles split and raw, the shovel handle slick with sweat and ash. I remembered how Ruth once laughed at the idea of flowers. Give me wheat, Zeke, something that grows tall and feeds folks, not pretty for a day and gone. So I buried her in the south field, under the tallest stalks, Micah beside her. When it was done, I sat in the dirt until the sun dropped away. My chest felt caved in, heart thudding like something trapped under the floorboards. I thought about the last time I held a gun, how it made me feel hollow and powerful all at once. That part of me, the one I'd tried to smother under years, of dirt and sweat, started to claw its way back up. I waited until full dark, then slipped inside the half-burned ruin. The old box was still there, behind a loose floorboard in the corner. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a worn leather holster, a pistol with the initials EB carved into the grip, and a small black Bible, the pages frayed and stained. I pressed my thumb into the indent of the cross on the cover, trying to remember the man I'd promised Ruth I'd never become again. I took the pistol out, heavy and cold, and slid it into the holster. The preacher, they used to call me. A name spoken with a mix of fear and awe, long before Dust Whistle, long before Ruth. I'd sworn I was done with blood, but the world had a way of reminding a man who he really was. That night, I stood by their graves, stars smeared across the sky like salt on a wound, and I made a promise. I'd find the ones who did this. I'd give them every ounce of hurt they left me, not for God, not for justice, for Ruth, for Micah, for myself. I barely slept. Dawn brought no comfort, just a cold ache in my bones and the gnaw of hunger I refused to acknowledge. By first light, I'd washed the blood from my hands in the creek, but nothing could strip away the stain inside. My fingers fumbled as I loaded the pistol, muscle memory winning out where faith had failed. The farm felt hollow. The fields stood silent, every stalk bearing witness to my grief. I packed what little I had, Ruth's wedding ring, Micah's pocket knife, a sack of bread, and the Bible, tucked away where no one could see it. The act of preparing, of doing something, dulled the edges of my pain. I pulled on my coat, buckled the holster, and walked to the barn, every step echoing with things I'd never get to say. Dust Whistle sat in the valley like a secret, always waiting for the next storm. I rode in before the shops opened, the sky, still bruised from the night. Harper was sweeping his stoop, and when he saw me, his face fell, not out of surprise, but dread. "Zeke," he said, and then nothing else for a long, heavy moment. I nodded. "Need supplies, more than usual." He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if someone might overhear. "Word's gone around already, about the fire, about Ruth and Micah." His voice shook a little. "Folks are scared." I gripped the edge of the counter, fighting down a rising tide of rage. "3 men, strangers. You see them?" Harper swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing like a cork. "They're still here. Saw them at the Black Dog last night, buying drinks with new bills. People say they're looking for work, but nobody trusts a man with clean boots and no calluses. It was then that I saw it in his eyes. Recognition. Not just of the preacher's gun on my hip, but of who I'd been before. the man with a sermon in one hand and judgment in the other. The town had needed him once, before Ruth, before the promise of peace. "They know who you are?" Harper whispered, barely moving his lips. "Maybe," I said, voice flat. "They'll know soon enough." When I stepped outside, the air prickled with whispers. People peered from windows, curtains twitching like nervous fingers. I could feel it, the rumor passing, the fear settling on the street like dust. The preacher's back. Some folks spit when they said it. Others looked at me like a ghost had walked through the door. I went to the church. It was empty, pews bathed in cold morning light. I knelt at the altar, the wood scarred by years of confession. I pulled out my old journal and wrote Ruth's and Micah's names. My hand shook, ink blotting the page. I didn't pray for forgiveness. I didn't ask for strength. I just promised them I wouldn't let their deaths pass quietly. As the bell tolled the hour, I strapped on my gun belt and stepped back into the street, letting the town see me. See all of me. No more hiding, no more pretending I could outgrow the shadow of what I'd been. The preacher was alive again, and Dust Whistle would bear witness to whatever came next. By midday, word had traveled ahead of me like a brush fire. Every glance, every whispered conversation told me I'd become news again. The preacher, risen out of sorrow and dirt, was a story Dust Whistle needed as much as it feared. Still, a few weren't afraid to meet my eyes. June Carver stood on her porch, arms folded, her widow's black faded gray from the sun. "Don't forget gloves," she called. "Blood sticks worse than mud, Zeke." She tossed me an old pair, her late husband's patched at the palms. Sheriff Crow was waiting by the livery, nervous as a colt. He was young, all badge and bravado, but his eyes were tired. "I heard what you're fixing to do, Boon," he said, jaw clenched. "If you find those men, the law expects you to bring them in alive. Dust Whistle doesn't need another legend, it needs peace." "I'm not after legends," I said, voice steady. "I want justice, not a graveyard." He tried to stare me down, but I'd seen too much loss to be cowed. "Don't make me come looking for you, Zeke. My job's hard enough. Without burying another Boon." I nodded, mounting up. "You won't have to." The trail out of town was easy at first, wagon ruts worn deep, the scent of sage thick in the air. But vengeance sharpens a man's senses. I found signs the law had missed, boot prints heavy from drink, a broken flask with a southern label. Spent matches ground into the dust. The trail bent through dry gulches and narrow canyons, the kind of country where sound carries but light can't reach. By dusk, I spotted their camp, a battered canvas tent, a gutted jackrabbit on a spit, whiskey, bottles rolling in the dirt. Laughter drifted up, cruel and careless. I watched from the rocks, heart drumming slow but fierce. 3 men, Empt Rayner, Leach, and Hank, each marked by the particular slackness of men who think the world owes them nothing but another day alive. I waited, watching, letting the old discipline return. My hands steadied. My mind sorted every detail. Who held their drink, who kept their pistol close, who looked over their shoulder and who never bothered. I listened to their stories, lies about gold, brags about what they'd done and who they'd hurt. Empt was the worst, his laugh like a dog's bark, sharp and joyless. Night thickened. Coyotes sang in the far hills, answering each other's loneliness. I remembered Ruth's hands, the way she'd tuck stray hair behind her ear, the way she'd hum when she thought I wasn't listening. The urge to act, to end it, quick and brutal, burned in my chest, but I forced myself to wait. I needed to know, to be sure. This wasn't just about blood. It was about truth, and not becoming the thing I hated. I lay still until their laughter faded into snores and sighs. My time would come. But not yet. Not blind. Not like them. The hours crawled. I listened to the fire die down, the men's breathing growing heavy, each snore a small confession. The gun felt heavier on my hip than it ever had in my hand. I waited, for the last ember to wink out, for the world to settle into darkness. My mind played old sermons against the night, words about mercy, about turning the other cheek. But the weight in my chest was all vengeance, thick and red. A branch snapped. Behind me. I turned, pistol half drawn, only to see a skinny shadow creeping from the tent's edge. He was young, no more than 16, face pale and pinched, hair sticking out in tufts like a plucked chick. He stumbled, nearly tripping over a boot. When he saw me, his eyes went wide as moons. He put his hands up so fast he almost fell backward. "Don't shoot, mister. I swear I didn't do nothing. They made me come. I was just supposed to watch the horses." I lowered the pistol but kept it ready. "Your name?" "Clay. Clay Miller." "Please, mister, I got no part in what happened at your farm. I tried to leave, but Emmett said he'd kill me if I ran." His words tumbled out desperate, each one raw with terror. I studied him, searching for that telltale darkness, but all I saw was a boy trapped between monsters. My first instinct was to hate him, to see in him the echo of my own lost boy. But I remembered Micah's hands, the way he used to hide stray kittens under the porch, how innocents can die so quietly in the wrong company. "Go," I said, voice like gravel. "Head north. Keep off the trail. If you ever touch a woman or a child, I'll find you." He nodded so hard his teeth rattled, then scrambled into the brush, leaving behind only the smell of fear. I waited until his footfalls vanished before letting out a shaky breath. My hand shook, and for a moment I wanted to follow, to let the whole thing end with mercy. But the image of Ruth, of Micah, dragged me back. The camp stirred. MTT snorted awake, cursing at the cold. I lay still, fighting. The urge to act, to rush in and end it. I remembered Ruth's warnings about darkness breeding more darkness, about how a man can drown in blood if he doesn't know when to stop. By dawn, the choice pressed in on me. Take my revenge without mercy, or leave something behind for Ruth to remember, something Micah would have been proud of. I checked my pistol, whispered a prayer I half believed, and waited for the world to crack open with the first light. First light stretched across the canyon, painting the rocks with a thin, bloody glow. I moved through the sage like a shadow, boots muffled by years of practice. Leach was first, snoring with his hat over his eyes, pistol loose beside his hand. I pressed the barrel to his neck before he woke, binding his wrists with June's patched gloves, gagging his mouth with a strip of canvas torn from his own shirt. He thrashed, but I held him down, whispering, "One sound, and you're gone." Hank was next, half awake, reaching for his flask. I knocked him cold with a rock and trussed him tight. The camp was silent except for Emmett Rayner, hunched by the ashes, muttering curses as he poked at last night's fire. He looked up and grinned when he saw me, teeth yellow and sharp, eyes dead as river stones. "Well, preacher," he spat, "come to finish your sermon?" I kept my pistol steady, chest tight. "This isn't for God, it's for my family." He rose slow, hands open, showing off the scars running along his knuckles. "You think peace was ever yours? Men like us, we don't get clean, we just get old." His words burrowed in, mean and true. I stepped closer, rage crackling in my blood. The fight was fast, brutal. A knee to my gut, his knife slicing past. My ribs. I tasted iron, saw stars. But I remembered Ruth's face, Micah's laugh, and I refused to die here, not like this. We crashed through the embers, scattering sparks. I pinned him, twisting the knife from his hand, pressing his head to the dirt. My fist rose, ready to end it, to bury every ache and scream in this man's skull. But I stopped. For a moment, all I heard was Ruth's voice, quiet as a memory. "Don't let the darkness take you." My breath shook. I bound Emmett's wrists, shoved the pistol in his back, and dragged him over to the others. They glared at me, 3 broken men, no more myth than bone and gristle. I sat back, blood soaking my shirt, hands slick and trembling. The urge to kill pulsed in my veins, but I forced myself still. I wasn't here to be a butcher. I waited, eyes on the horizon, until the sun rose high enough to show me the path back. I'd give these men to the law, let Dust Whistle see what justice looked like when it was earned, not stolen. The preacher was alive, but he'd drawn his line. No more blood for blood, not if I could help it. Sheriff Crow arrived with a posse just past noon, sweat darkening his collar, eyes darting between the trussed outlaws and my battered face. He looked at Emmett, then at me, and I saw relief flicker through his anger. "You brought them in alive. I'll be damned, Boon." The townsfolk gathered as we dragged the men through Dust Whistle's main street, words spreading like a grass fire. Some folks stared in grim silence. Others spat at the outlaw's feet. I walked behind, pistol holstered, chin up, feeling the weight of every gaze. Justice in the open air, no more midnight vengeance, no hiding in the brush. This time, everyone would witness what had been lost and what might still be saved. Crow called for a public hearing. The outlaws, bloody and broken, sat chained on the courthouse steps. EMT never flinched, sneering at the crowd, jaw clenched as if daring someone to finish what I'd started. The townsfolk wanted blood. There were shouts for a hanging, for fire, for the old ways. I stood before them, battered but unbroken, and spoke for the first time in days. I was a preacher once, I told them, voice rough as gravel. I buried my past because I thought peace was something you could plant and forget. But violence doesn't rot away. It waits. It grows. My family, Ruth and Micah, they were good. Better than me. I couldn't save them, but I won't let what killed them shape this town. Crow stepped forward, laying a hand on my shoulder. Zeke's done what few men could. The law will have its say. These men will stand trial in Dust Whistle. No lynching, no mob. There was grumbling, but something shifted. The town, for all its pain, saw itself in me. A man marked by loss, standing at the edge of something terrible, refusing to fall in. I could feel their suspicion, their respect, the old ache of belonging I hadn't felt since before Ruth. That night, I returned to my ruined farm. Alone, I lit a lantern and stared at the journal that bore my family's names. The preacher's story wasn't finished, but maybe it could end different than it began. I was ready at last to face my own judgment, not as a weapon, but as a witness. Time limped on in Dust Whistle, every day a little quieter, every sunrise stained by memory. MT Rayner and his men stood trial beneath the unflinching gaze of the town. No escape in lies or swagger. Crow presided with the steadiest hand he could muster. When the verdict came, guilty, sentenced to hang, the townsfolk watched in silence as justice, hard and ugly, was carried out on the edge of the wheat fields. There were no cheers, just the solemn understanding that vengeance does not bring the dead home. For me, grief clung to everything. I spent my days rebuilding what was left, patching fences, clearing charred beams, coaxing the stubborn land to live again. Sometimes I'd sit by the graves at sunset, the Bible open in my lap, Ruth's ring warm in my palm. I burned my old journal one morning, the pages that carried every sermon, every regret, letting the smoke rise to the sky, taking the last of the preacher's shadow with it. One afternoon, June Carver arrived, her hair pulled back tight, arms full of bread and a battered Bible. She pressed it into my hands, eyes shining but unshed tears holding in the corners. "Found this in the pew where Ruth used to sit," she said. She left a violet pressed between the pages, said it was for forgiveness. The scent of crushed flour and leather made something in my chest loosen. I held the Bible as if it weighed more than any pistol. June sat beside me in the warm hush of the barn. We talked little, but she brought quiet, the kind that asks nothing in return. She helped with chores, kept the silence gentle. I didn't find peace, not fully, but I chose to stay. The first spring, I planted new wheat in the south field, right, over Ruth and Micah, believing they'd rise again as green shoots, tall and proud. I learned to live with the scars, letting the sun and the land work on me, steady as breath. By the time the wind changed, the farm was growing back. There were still nights when grief gnawed at the edges, but I was building, not burying. I let June walk beside me when the days got long. I let forgiveness take root in small ways. A fresh loaf, a kind word, a shared look at dusk. I never became a legend. But I did become a man willing to live, proof that sometimes the hardest thing isn't justice or vengeance. It's learning to begin again,